got 3 teams working off like a shared backlog, or that backlog could be shared. Let's just put those 3 teams together into one tribe. And this is where we're moving from siloed teams into a network. So this tribe is now a network of talent. So the network of talent. So how do we get the work distributed across that network of talent, and keep them in sync with each other? So we meet at Cadence, and we're experimenting with 2-day iterations right now, which have been working out pretty well. We went from 2 days to a week. Now we're back to 2 days again. That turned out to have certain benefits to it. So every 2 days, this tribe gets together and we say, hey, all right, what work is there? And that's where you said there's stuff on a wall. So ideally, there's some way of visualizing our work or what's in the backlog. So the product owner role, we've renamed it to product director because I'm trying to use the analogy of a movie director, because it's a little bit more than a product owner. So the product director says, hey, here's what's changed in the backlog, or here's anything new, here's what some new information, here's what I like, and really tries to fire the team up. So it's like a movie director. Like you're trying to get people inspired and follow your vision. So we're re-clarifying on the vision and identifying what's important to the product director. So at this point, then we go into something akin to open space, very similar to open space, where someone will say, well, okay, that thing that's just been put on the backlog there, I'm going to start work on that one. And then someone else will get up and say, well, I'm going to continue work on the feature that I was on last time. Someone else will say, we're noticing a pattern forming here. I think there's some core components that we can pull out. I'm going to start on this component layer. Someone else will say, yeah, we kind of raced to the finish line and we left a lot of tech debt behind. I'm going to do some refactoring. So these are different things that can happen. So you can pull from the backlog, or use some examples of other activities that might happen. But essentially the tribe are going to self-organize. So now in this example I mentioned 4, we call them swarm stewards. So we've now got 4 people that had essentially said, hey, these are 4 things that we want to do. And then everyone else in the network will go and put their names up against those 4 things, and that's what happens for the next iteration. So we dynamically form and reform teams on this cadence of every 2 days. So that's how the iteration opens. How the iteration closes is at the exact same meeting. So what I described was how we start. But before we do that, we close out the previous iteration. And so we've all come together, and we'll say, okay, we call it show and tell. All right, let's go through each swarm and share. And this is to get kind of collective consciousness of what has changed in the system. So that means at most everyone is only one iteration out of sync with the whole of the network. So the goal is to kind of get everyone back in sync and say, oh, that's what that team did, or that's what that one did. And what's interesting is when you get up and say, hey, I'm going to facilitate a swarm, it's not so much I'm going to do this story. It's more about I want to deliver value in this area against this feature, or yeah, I'm going to start on this story, and depending on how many people come and join me, I'm going to move on to these other stories as well. So it's kind of an indicator. It's not story driven as much as value driven. So we declare how we're going to add value to the system, because you don't know how many people are going to come and join you in your swarm. If it's 2 people, you've got a pair, and we can get like the equivalent of 1 story done. If it's 6 people, we might swarm, or we might have 4 people on a swarm, or on a mob. We've done some training with Woody Zool on mobbing, so that's become very popular. We might have 4 people in a mob, and then another pair. So we'll identify parallel tracks. And there's some more nuances to that as to how we track work and so forth, but that's the core concept.
I see. So I want to just play that back to you.
Okay.
So there's the initial meeting. And so the initial meeting starts off with the product director, and there's probably a visual wall, and there's stuff on the wall that the product director wants done.
Yeah.
Is it in priority order?
It could be. So ideally, yes. And it's ideally it's in a story map format.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in story map, highest priority to the left, lowest to the right.
Okay. And then after, so the product director says a few things about what's on the wall and what's actually changed since last time.
Yeah. And fires up the troops.
Fires up the troops. And is there a Q&A?
Yes. Well, there can be. I mean, it's pretty informal. So, yeah, if you got any questions, stick your hand up and ask the product owner. But the more people you have at that meeting, you got to be pretty strict on how much back and forth goes. There goes. So for instance, if the product owner says, "Hey, here's this new feature," and he'll spend some time describing it. And if you can ask a few questions, and then he'll say, "All right, look, Todd there has expressed his interest in being Swarm Steward. If you want to know more about it, jump on the Swarm, and the first thing we're going to do is really drill into this feature, because you can't really start on." So if a swarm picks up a new feature, you're not going to get that feature done in 2 days. So the very first thing you have to do as a swarm is to meet and say, well, what is this feature? and start drilling into it. And that's where you use your skills of creating stories and breaking stories down to start doing that work. So it might take half a day just getting to understanding what the feature is and breaking it down. And to enough granularity that you've got something to work on for the next day and a half or so.
I see. And then how long does the meeting take? How long might it take?
So right now at Primera, we've got 50 people in our largest tribe. And on a good day, we can get through that meeting in 15 minutes. Sometimes on a bad day, it'll stretch out to 30 minutes. So 15 to 30 minutes. And that's the entire tribe meeting twice, every 2 days.
Okay, excellent. And then it seems to me like if you're starting something new, the product director's time would be at a huge premium.
Yes, so if you're starting something new, yes, and he's aware of that. So if he puts a new feature up and he wants someone to start working on that, then he knows that. Well, he's got to be. So the product director will tie the Swarm Steward up with whoever knows the most about that feature. So it might be an analyst, or it might be stakeholders, or it might be that person themselves. So, but whoever it is, they've got to be part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm. And in a sort of micro-specialized team or tribe, is there sort of capacity hunting where people, keep going down until they find something that?
Oh, no. So one of the values of the rules, I guess, of FAST is do the right thing, and that is do the right thing by the release. So, and this is where you have to become T-shaped and work on your generality, because hey, my specialty is front end, but then the stories go up and none of them have any front end work on them. So what do I do? So I join someone else and say, hey, I'm going to learn about backend work, and we work on our generality as well.
Right. And then how do you keep an understanding of like progress against the feature and what
Yeah,
the state of the
that's a
state?
really good question, and we've had to work on that one. So the story map is kind of the product director's view, high level view of here's what's happening in the tribe, and then what we found was that as that story, it's kind of hard to maintain a story map that kind of splinters very quickly. So a quick visual on the story map, we identify anything that's been started or finished. So with a quick visual, I can see, hey, 3 out of 6 features of this release have been started and 1 has been finished. So that means we're roughly halfway through. So that's a very high level. 3 out of 6 has started. Well, actually, if 3 out of 6 were done, then you're halfway through. But there's an indicator of like, okay, we're 25% through. So that's a high level view for the product director. And what we've started doing is as a new feature comes up, and this is where we maintain some stickiness because teams can dynamically reform. So the one area that we said of stickiness is that someone needs to take ownership of a new feature. So we call that the feature steward. So a feature steward will own that, and you stay with that feature all the way through. And so it's equivalent of like maintaining feature teams, but a feature steward has a dynamic team, but he or she will stick through. You can hand the baton over, and there's ways of doing that, but essentially someone's always a key point. So when a new feature comes along, the feature steward will meet with whoever signs up for that first day to really break down that feature. And we do that on a feature map, which is a story map, which is just for that feature. And that feature map is one of the huge, great finds that we've made in working this way, because you can work with a feature map. Doesn't matter if you're part fast or not. And the feature map is really where we track how and when the breakdown of that feature into smaller pieces, and we call them chunks because like an example of like epic feature story task are different levels of chunking, and because these chunks keep going down and down, we said let's just call them chunks because here's a big chunk and there's these as you go down they get more granular. So a feature breaks down into chunks, and then essentially that's how we track the work, and you get very granular in that, and then as things get done, we actually pull them back off. So you can imagine this tree growing down and then coming up, and then another branch will go down until at the top level gets done, and then hey, the feature is done. So that's how we track progress at the large level and then the feature level. So once that feature is done, we mark it off as done on the story map. But at any point, the product director can say, hey, where is this going? How's this looking? And we can look at that.
I see. And I don't understand what this has to do with open space.
Okay. So the matching up to open space is the mechanism of how do we assign work to people to work, and that's where we borrowed from open space, in that the fast meeting is very akin to open space, where in open and when I say open space, I use an open space conference where we open the conference and then people will come up and say, well, here's the thing that I would like to talk about. And that goes up on the wall, and we create a marketplace for that open space conference. And then people will look at our marketplace and using the used to be called the law of 2 feet. We now call it the law of whatever it's called, and we'll use that law, and we will naturally decide which sessions we're most interested in and go to those sessions. And then the law of the principles of, the right people have the right conversations at the right time. We've kind of gone with that to say, well, the right people will work on the right stories at the right time, using the same mechanism. And the law of mobility, that's what I was trying to remember. The law of mobility applies also. Like, hey, we've started working on this thing. We're kind of totally blocked because there's some stuff we didn't know. What should we do? Well, we can disband and go and join some other mobs, other swarms, or we could pick up something else from the backlog and start on that as well. So there's a lot of the kind of rules and principles that we borrowed from open space.
I see.
Can you see the mapping there?
I do. So let me rephrase that back to you. So what's similar is the idea of choice,
yeah,
and autonomy, and groups that dynamically form around a particular topic. Yes. And then they reform every 2-day sprint.
Yes.
And
yeah. So a little side story. How this all started was, so my background as an Agile coach, I go to our conferences, and I think it was 2014. It was the Scrum gathering in New Orleans, and it was a 3-day conference. 2 days was traditional, sessions, and then the last day was open space. And I'd presented a session the previous day, so I was kind of exhausted by the third day. I thought, I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to be a butterfly and just kind of renew my energy on this day. And so I just sat there and watched the open space around me. I'd been to open space sessions before, but then for some reason, like once we'd formed the marketplace, something suddenly struck me. I'm like, this is remarkable. We've just organized 800 people in 20 minutes. And I thought, well, how fantastic is this open space format that you can using self-organization, I can create a 1-day conference in 20 minutes with 800 people. That's truly incredible. And then what struck me is, why aren't we using this mechanism to the organization at scale? I'm like, well, Agile at scale. And so as an Agile coach, there's various things that were happening in the industry with Agile at scale, and I was always, none of them really kind of sat right. And I thought, why aren't we using this mechanism, which is extremely compatible with what we value in Agile, like self-organization, to come up with an Agile scaling model? And so that was the birth of the idea, and you had to like put a lot around that core idea to make it into an Agile scaling model. But I started doing that over time, and that was that is how Fast Agile came about. So it was actually from open space and what open space values and what open space is trying to do, that, the fact that it is about autonomy, it is about self-organization, and this is what Agile is supposed to be about, not command and control, not big design up front. This is emergent design, and people forming and reforming. So that was how it started, and why it's shaped around open space.
I see. And can you say something about what the physical space looks like?
That's a great question, because of course, for an open space conference to work, requires a certain physical space and physical layout. So in thinking about it, I thought, yeah, for this to work for an Agile scaling model, one is you have to be co-located. So maybe there's other models that you can work, but if you find out, please let me know. But I at first envisaged, well, I think you're going to have to be co-located. you're going to need to have a large area where that can facilitate the entire tribe to meet. Ideally, to have a wall, one where we're going to take the marketplace for that iteration, and one where we're going to have a persistent story map for the release, ideally in the same space. So that would be an ideal layout. And then around that area, or in a near vicinity, to have, my original vision was to have development rooms. So my background in extreme programming and in Scrum, you'd have a Scrum team working in one room. And so I imagined, well, that would constrain WIP. That, let's say we had 3 Scrum teams, we'll say, okay, well, if those 3, we had 3 rooms, they're the 3 kind of vertical columns or swim lanes that we make available to Marketplace. So that would be an ideal kind of layout. And in fact, at Primera, where we're experimenting with Fast now, we don't have that ideal layout, but we've come up with like mobbing stations and so forth. And it's interesting to see that the natural inclination is for work in progress to go very wide. So we've had to work hard at restricting and saying, hey, we're going to have 6 swim lanes and only 6 swim lanes, because without the constraints of having physical rooms to go in, people started like splintering off more and more. So is it a good idea? I think some level of being able to move beyond the physical, hey, we've only got 3 rooms, and people start getting creative, like, oh, we can go work at Starbucks. I think that should be encouraged, but there's a balance between work in progress going too wide, and then keeping it constrained. So that's what we discovered by actually starting working in this way.
I see. And so normally there would be one in a Scrum setup, there would be one product owner per team. And here you have one product owner, one product director for 30, 50 people. Yes.
And that's a really, really great question, because in my theory of Fast, I'm like, well, how big could that tribe grow to? And I came up with Dunbar's number because of reading various books on the maximum size of tribes that people can work at and so forth. And I think 150 is probably the maximum. But then how big is a backlog for 150 people? That's like it's pretty large. So I don't know if one product director is a good idea, or if that is equivalent of a chief product owner and she has sub product owners. I don't know. So at Primera, what kind of drove us in this direction was that we had a core Scrum size team, and our director was pulling in another product, and we were expanding our team out. And so the natural question becomes, well, do we split into 2 teams, which is the Scrum solution of saying, okay, we'll have 2 teams with 2 product owners. But rather than enforce that, we said to the team, hey, this thing's coming up, how do you want to do it? The team said, well, we want to stay together. And we said, well, okay, well, maybe there's a way that we can do it. Here's a crazy idea I had a while ago, and it's based on open space. Do you guys want to try it? And they said, well, sure, we'll give it a try. Let's try it for a couple of months. If it doesn't work, it's easy to fall back to patterns that we've known and used for a long time before, like traditional Scrum now. But we started working that way, and people loved it. And so we've been experimenting with new ways of working, and Fast has been evolving from that. So what's happened with our tribe is, so we went from 1 product to 2 products. There was in fact 2 product owners, and then that's now grown to about 4 products. And so there are in fact 4 product owners. One of the product owners kind of plays the role of chief product owner or the product director, and facilitates the Fast meeting. And this person will talk to the other product owners to make sure they have an understanding of like priorities. So they get all of that in sync before we go into this meeting. And that will come out as, hey, here's my priorities is this is what needs to happen over here, here. And there's some juggling around people. And we say, so there's another final step to the fast meeting, which is the product owner veto or adjustment. So as people self-organize, the product director can look at how they've decided to work and make adjustments and go, hang on guys, I said this thing here was my highest priority. No one signed up for it. This one's my lowest priority. This one comes off. Who can work on this one? So they can do some veto, and we've only had to do that like once or twice, but there is that ability to reshuffle things around if needs be. But so right now, yeah, we've got 4 product owners. Seems to be working.
So what does coaching look like in this environment?
It's very important to spend time onboarding because it is a different environment, and people will come into it with very anchored to Agile the way that they've seen it before. So they understand they're coming into an Agile environment, and that means something very specific. And Agile has now become more or less mainstream, and a very certain flavor of Agile is mainstream, which is story point velocity. I call it corporate Agile, corporate Scrum. So a lot of people come in with this corporate Scrum view of Agile, and they go, where's the stories? Where's the grooming? Where's the points? And I'm like, well, we did something like that, and here's how it looks. So it's very important to spend time getting them, making them aware you're coming into a very different environment, and recruiting appropriately. Like they've got to be comfortable with it, and then spending some time onboarding them, half a day or one day of like, hey, here's how we work and how the process works. The other part is continuous improvement, because in Scrum, of course, people are used to the retrospective, and they're like, where's the retrospective? So I had to think on, when I came up with Fast, I thought on what would that look like for a network of a tribe. And I came up with, well, why don't we just use open space again and meet on some sort of cadence? If you look at the Agile Manifesto, it talks about, one of the principles is that at regular cadence, a team, and I can replace that word with tribe, will meet to reflect on how they've done and work out ways to improve. So how do we apply that at the tribe level? And we're about to experiment with having a 3-hour tribe-wide session, again based off open space, again to say, all right, how do we reflect and improve as a tribe? So I don't know what that looks like yet because we haven't done it, but I was really excited to, after we kind of agreed to do that as a tribe, to read Lalau's book, Reinventing Organizations, and finding another company mentioned there that did something actually very similar. I'm like, oh, well, that's good. And it's been working for them. So if this idea doesn't work, or we might use a combination of theirs, but we can start experimenting with how does continuous improvement, what does that look like in this format?
Yeah. So I work primarily in large 100-year-old corporations and like 3,000 person IT organizations.
Okay.
And 20% of the people are afraid. 20% of the people are fighting each other. 10% of the people are hiding.
Mm-hmm.
What's known about Fast in an environment like that?
Not a lot. In that, I don't think it's for everyone. I think it is going to be for companies that are a little more progressive, and it is heavily based on trust. And I think what would happen is a lot of people will be uncomfortable with it, particularly if you're a hider, because I think it's very hard to hide in a highly collaborative environment, which is what this is. So you'll stand out pretty quickly as someone that is hiding, and it's very easy to hide in large companies. And so I think you need to be prepared for if you do move to this model. So we were lucky that we kind of got to grow our team, and we got to grow into it and expand our tribe already working in this way. So part of the recruitment process is, hey, this is how we're working. So there's no fighting it because they agree to it coming in. But yeah, making the switch, I think that's kind of similar to making the switch to Agile. There's always going to be some people that aren't going to make the journey, and you need to be prepared for that. But it's extremely empowering because it's starting to treat people like I don't want to say you're not already, but it's really treating people like adults in the workplace and saying, what do you think you should work on? What's the right thing to do? And natural leadership starts forming, which is one of the values. And natural leadership is so at an open space conference, having the courage to get up and stand up and saying, hey, I want to facilitate a session is an exhibition of natural leadership. And so we see natural leadership, we allow natural leadership to happen inside Fast. So by having a tribe, it enables anyone to start using their leadership skills. And really leadership is the ability to influence others. And so if I get up and I say, I'm going to work on this, and nobody shows up to work with me, and that keeps happening, there's an indicator that I don't have the leadership skills yet to do that. So I think at a large corporation, I think it's gonna shake things up, but it's gonna shake it up in a good way. And you're going to have to be prepared for taking a hit on productivity in the short term. But in the long term, you're going to have a tribe of people that are coming to work because they're passionate about work, and they're working with a tribe of people that they want to be there with.
Yeah, so you've said a lot of things there that I want to ask about. So one of them is that there seems to be a fundamental distinction between starting with a 5-person team that's growing, so it works and you're scaling that, versus going into a 100-year-old 3,000-person organization and starting off with a 100-person group and switching it.
Yeah.
So to the point where that sounds totally wrong to me, just as I say it, and maybe the right thing to do would be to start with the 5-person team, make it work, and then move up in the fast way.
Yes, I've never made the large scale transition to fast, and my inclination would be exactly that what you described. I think it would be way too high, too disruptive, too high risk to throw everyone in the pool at the same time. So let's start with one team, and Fast actually works on the small scale as well, which was interesting to find because Fast was designed to be like a large scale model, but because we started in the relatively small, we found that there's a pattern that works on the small and there's a pattern that works in the large. I'm in the process of kind of describing what small scale Fast looks like compared to large and when to kind of transition. Basically, at the size where you're ready to be the equivalent of 2 Scrum teams, then you're ready to transition to kind of larger scale. But I think start with one team and get the pattern down there, and then 1 team to 2 team, because you're going to have attrition even as starting from 1 and then you move to 2. But I think that's good attrition because you're going to you want to discover the people that want to be there and get, I don't like saying get rid of, but natural deselection of the people that don't want to be there. Yeah. And it's the law of like attracts like. So as soon as like, hey, this place isn't where I want to work anymore, I can't hide. I need to find another big company where I can go and hide. That's what they're going to do.
Right. And it seems to me that there's something in there about how complex systems are actually developed.
Yes, yes. So that's that's a really good point. And complex adaptive system, and that's exactly what we're trying to create, is a complex adaptive system that we can react to change, which is what the heart of agility is about. That I can throw something new in the backlog, and within 2 days I've got people already working on it. I can look, because I'm iterating on such short, tight scales, I can look at something and go, yeah, you know what, that's totally wrong, and I've only lost 2 days, or you know what, let's change direction. So that's the adaptive nature, and it is you form a complex system, and anytime you get people together, it is a complex system, and the larger the triad. So the managing a complex system is very different, and there's no hooks like traditional management hooks into this. It becomes its own beast. And so there's a word of warning there. It takes the tribe will take on its own flavor, and you can't really manage it in a traditional management sense. It's a little bit like maybe it's a poor analogy, but the what was that book, Lord of the Flies, right? So that's a negative side of how it could go very badly. But that's an example of hey, once you release self-organization, it's going to go in its own direction. So and this is where like coaching and the role of the product director and having like a good agile coach to kind of keep things together is important, because you want that shape to start forming in the right direction. But it's subtle and it's not managed in the typical sense. And in fact, that's one of the challenges around working this way. I mean, it's a good and a bad bit, because the level of middle management is going to drop because there's not a lot for you to do. And I mean, there's no Scrum Masters in Fast Agile either. Like I'm the one Agile coach for the entire tribe. So if you have Scrum Masters, you throw them in the tribe and say, hey, make yourself useful. Like, how can you? I think that's the key question. Like, if you want to be part of the tribe, the question is, how can I add value to this tribe? So there's a natural fallout, and then there's natural leadership will start forming.
Have you noticed that there are any personality types, introverts versus extroverts, thinkers versus feelers, that thrive or don't?
That's right. So it's been surprising that, in fact, the introverts, because a lot of introverts, when they hear about it, they're kind of scared. Like, I don't want to stand up at Marketplace, and that's okay. And that's kind of the beauty of Marketplace. You don't have to be a natural leader. But I've seen it's wonderful to watch introverts start coming out of themselves and come
out. Sound has just collapsed. Sorry.
You there?
Okay, yeah. The sound just went terrible for a second. Now it's fine.
All right. Okay. Yeah, it's beautiful to watch introverts become natural leaders, and you don't have to be an extrovert to be a leader. And that's because a leader is just someone that has influence and that has people following them. That's to me the definition of a leader. So people will follow you for different reasons. Like, I will follow this guy because this guy is the smartest developer I've ever met in my life. He's like true genius. I want to work with this guy. So I'll say to him, hey, what are you working on next iteration? Because I'm learning a lot from being in your swarm and pairing with you. And so people are finding what their natural skill sets are and what they're good at, and it just becomes enhanced. So the only types that don't do well are the ones that are very that have a strong attachment to hierarchical organization and have done well in that in the past and don't want to let go of working in that way. So yeah, I think that's all I can say. So it's working in these older organizations, which Primera is a health insurance company. It's been around a long time, and it is a traditional company in many ways. And so some of the people that have been there a long time, some of them like it, and then some don't. And that's I think that it's not for everyone. And yet those people that don't like it, there's still plenty of room inside the company for them to excel in other parts of the company that do still work that way and value people that work that way.
And what's the standard or typical calendar?
So we started with 2-day iterations because that was my guess originally. So one of the principles of the Agile Manifesto is short releases and working on what is it, the exact wording, favoring a shorter time scale. So I thought, well, how can I push that boundary? How far back can I go if we're going to work in iterative fashion? How far back can I go? And from my background in extreme programming, I remember, at the start of the iteration, I'd pick a story and I'd pair with someone. And typically, most stories would take about 2 days. Like, I'd pair with someone, we'd get done in 2 days. So I thought, well, given that most stuff takes about 2 days, why don't we just make iterations 2 days long? Because then I know that you should have something done by 2 days. When you get good at breaking down stories, there's about a pair for 2 days. So why don't we try 2 days? So that was the original theory, and we started with that. And then we tried 1 week iteration. So you'd have a fast meeting on Monday, and then next Monday you'd have the next fast meeting. Because remember, we closed the iteration and then immediately opened it. Because whilst they were trying to minimize meetings as well, like that's a big part of it. How do I cut back on meetings? So there's only one meeting, it's the fast meeting, and so that would be Monday, and then Monday again, or you could pick whichever the other day. Well, we made it Monday. And we went back to 2-day iterations. And the interesting thing with 2-day iterations, and this is where the self-organization comes in. I'm like, all right, you guys want 2-day iterations again. How do you want to do it? Do you want to do it every 2 days? So an iteration might span Friday and then Monday, which I was kind of a fan of. I was hoping they would go that way. And this is where I don't tell, I suggest and I ask, but ultimately the tribe themselves will make decisions. And we'll say, okay, we've decided as a tribe to go to 2 days. And what they came up with was Monday and Tuesday is an iteration. Wednesday was a down day. And then Wednesday we would purposely move all the meetings to Wednesdays. So that would give us more focused time on during the iteration. And then Thursday, Friday was another 2-day iteration. So that was one implementation that we've been doing. We've since changed that for various reasons. So now Tuesday and Wednesday is iteration, and Thursday, Friday is iteration. So we moved Wednesday activities to Monday. That seems to work. I think I would have been more in favor of just continuous 2-day iterations, but it's not my decision. And this is what I mean, where the tribe will take on a culture of its own, and it's a complex adaptive system, and you kind of got to let it go. You kind of got to let them do what they want to do.
Excellent. So I'm going to wrap up here and ask you some administrative questions. Is there anything you want to say or do here at the end?
Well, I can give a plug for there's a 2-day fast training class coming up next month in Madrid. If you go to the Fast Agile website, which is fast-agile.com, you can see details of that.
Okay, awesome. So I was going to title this video with some name. What title might I give it?
Maybe Agile at Scale using open space.
Agile at Scale using open space. So does that mean that you don't want the word fast to appear?
You can put fast in there.
So fast colon.
You could so fast. So the name is Fast Agile. So you could do Fast Agile dash Agile at Scale based on open space. And the word fast is an acronym for the letters AST is Agile Scaling Technology, and the technology being open space technology. And then the reason I called it fast was because I thought, well, I think if this works, this is going to produce software at a rate faster than anything that I've seen to date. And that's when the idea, how fast? So so the letter F stands for fast because it's going to produce software fast. And then it becomes actually recursive, which software geeks kind of like that. Like, oh, so that's what fast stands for.
And you want your name on it?
Sure.
Okay. And then do you want a website or a contact on it?
The website is actually put the website as fastagile.io, which is the new domain I'll be moving the website to. And right now that does a redirect back to the old. So let's put the new one down.
Okay.
And then just for contact, do you want like an email address or?
If you want to provide that, do you want that to be on the title slide?
Do info@fastagile.io.
All right. Excellent. And then I was going to ask you, I have a friend who has an online Agile user group. So they meet online. It's exactly like a face-to-face one where someone speaks for 45 minutes and then they do a Q&A.
Yeah.
Would you like me to introduce you to him?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. This has been great. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate it.
Great. I'm glad. I love talking about it. So yeah. So thank you.
Fantastic. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye.